The time a single scout fought behind enemy lines for 3 days, this changed everything. The winter sun never truly rose over the Ardennes on 16 December 1944. Thick gray clouds smothered the sky, swallowing the light and burying the dense Belgian forests in a bitter metallic gloom. Snow drifted between the pines in slow, ghostly sheets, and the air carried a sharp silence broken only by distant artillery rumbling across the front. This was the opening day of the German Ardennes offensive, a last-ditch gamble the world would remember as the Battle of the Bulge.
And deep inside those wintry forests, between the villages of Huningen, Manderfeld, and the slopes leading toward Elsenborn Ridge, one American scout would soon find himself cut off, surrounded, and forced to survive 3 days entirely alone behind enemy lines. His name was Private First Class Andrew Hale, age 22, reconnaissance scout with the 394th Infantry Regiment, 99th Infantry Division. He carried only his M1 Garand, a trench knife, 5 grenades, a map case, a pair of binoculars, and a battered SCR-300 radio, whose battery barely handled the Ardennes cold. He had no idea that in 72 hours his actions would help reshape the northern front of the Bulge and prevent one of Hitler's most elite divisions from smashing through to the Meuse. Little did he know, what happened next would become legendary.
To understand why PFC Hale's lone fight mattered, we must examine the state of the American line on the eve of the attack. The 99th Infantry Division, known as the Checkerboard Division, occupied a long, thin defensive frontage. The terrain east of Elsenborn Ridge was rugged: dense woods, frozen stream beds, rolling hills, and narrow roads barely wide enough for a single vehicle. The division was considered green. Many of its soldiers had never faced a major German offensive. To their south stood the 106th Infantry Division, 2 of whose regiments would soon be swallowed whole by encirclement. To their rear, the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division prepared fallback positions along Elsenborn Ridge itself.
Opposing them was the 277th Volksgrenadier Division, reinforced by veterans of the Eastern Front, and equipped with MG-42 machine guns, STG-44 assault rifles, 81mm mortars, demolition charges, and heavy support from armored units belonging to the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. The Germans planned to break through this sector, seize Elsenborn Ridge, and open a corridor for rapid armored exploitation. If they succeeded, thousands of American troops would be trapped. If they were stopped, the northern shoulder of the Bulge would hold firm. This is where Hale comes in.
On the morning of December 16th, Hale and 2 other scouts were sent east of Huningen to observe German troop movement. Heavy fog blanketed the forest. Visibility was barely 20 yards. Hale recalled hearing faint metallic rattles, tank tracks, but the fog swallowed everything. At 5:30, German artillery erupted. More than 1,600 enemy guns opened fire along a 50-mile front. Within minutes, communication lines severed. Patrols disappeared. Companies lost cohesion. The forest shook with explosions that blasted snow into towering white plumes. Hale and his team took cover beneath a low ridge, shielding themselves from the artillery waves sweeping overhead.
When the barrage finally lifted, the snow around them looked churned like sea foam. The forest grew silent, except for one sound: boots crunching through snow. German infantry, a lot of them. Before Hale's patrol could withdraw, a full Volksgrenadier company advanced through the tree line. The scouts fell back, moving silently, crouched low, weaving between fir trees. But the Germans spread quickly, leapfrogging in tactical formation. A firefight erupted. 2 scouts were hit. Hale tried to drag one back, but machine gun fire pinned him down. He was forced to abandon the position and slip deeper into the forest's icy haze. By 0720, Hale was alone, behind enemy lines, and the German offensive was fully underway.
16 December, 8 hours. Hale crawled into a shallow depression beneath a fallen pine. He pulled a white scarf over his helmet and shoulders to blend with the snow. Through the needles and branches, he could glimpse dark gray shapes moving through the woods. German infantry advancing in tight groups. Their breath fogged in the cold, drifting like smoke. Hale steadied his binoculars. He counted 40, then saw more emerging from the mist. An entire battalion was moving toward the American line.
He reached for his radio, but hesitated. German listening posts could triangulate him if he transmitted too long. But if he didn't transmit at all, the 394th would be overrun. He whispered, "Red Lake, this is Scout 3. Heavy German movement. Grid 24 Baker. Multiple companies. In force." Static. Then, "Scout 3. Repeat. Signal weak." Hale relayed again. Short, sharp bursts.
Minutes later, distant U.S. artillery boomed. Shells missiled overhead and crashed among the Volksgrenadiers, scattering them into the trees. But now they knew an American observer was somewhere nearby, and they began to hunt.
16 December, 10:40 hours. Hale moved carefully through the frozen forest. Every footstep crunched. Every breath threatened to betray him. Snowflakes clung to his eyelashes. The cold bit deep into his fingers despite wool gloves. He stopped behind a cedar trunk. German voices. Close. He peered around the bark. A German platoon, about 35 men, was sweeping the area. 2 carried MG-42s. 1 officer held binoculars, scanning the ridgeline. They were coordinated, disciplined, and heading straight for Hale's last transmission point. He clutched his Garand. He could fight, or he could hide, but neither would matter if they found him. He slid silently backward, crawling through the snow, leaving almost no trail. By 11:15, he reached a small knoll providing a vantage point over a crossroads used by German scouts to guide follow-on troops. He could see more Volksgrenadiers arriving, hundreds of them. He steadied his breathing. He raised the radio handset. "Red Leg, new grid, enemy concentration, request immediate fire mission."
16 December, 11:16 hours. Part 2 begins. Red Leg, this is Scout 3. Enemy concentration. Grid 24 Baker to 24 Charlie. Repeat, heavy movement, multiple platoons. Requesting battery fire. Static hissed back through the cold. For a moment, Hale feared his radio battery had frozen. Then, Scout 3, copy. Fire mission inbound. Clear the line. Seconds later, the forest shook. 8 105mm shells tore into the crossroads. Snow blasted upward in thunderous white geysers. Trees snapped like matchsticks. German troops scattered into cover as shrapnel ripped through the clearing. Hale ducked behind the knoll as a second barrage boomed overhead, then a third. German officers shouted orders. Their voices carried through the trees, frantic and furious. They had been caught entirely exposed, because of Hale. But the consequences were immediate. They now knew there was an American scout close enough to observe them. Their search intensified. 16 December, 12:40 hours. The sun never emerged. Instead, daylight remained trapped behind thick clouds. Snow drifted sideways on icy gusts, swirling through the trees in pale curtains. Hale crawled deeper into the woods, his knees stiffening from the cold. His canteen was partially frozen. He shook it to break the ice before drinking. His breath puffed white into the frigid air. A moment later, he heard the unmistakable crack of branches. He froze. 2 German soldiers trudged through the snow less than 20 yards away. One carried an MP-40, the other a Kar 98K. They scanned the area methodically. One stopped, pointed toward Hale's direction. Hale clenched his jaw and slowly slid his body beneath a snow-covered log. He pulled the white scarf over his helmet, blending in. The Germans stepped closer. He could hear them talking. Der Beobachter muss hier irgendwo sein. The observer must be somewhere around here. Hale held his breath. The soldiers prodded the ground with their rifles, then turned away, continuing their sweep. Hale exhaled silently, heart pounding. He knew now. They weren't just looking for an American. They were searching for him. 16 December, 14:10 hours. The Germans began moving artillery spotters forward. Hale could see them from behind a snow-covered stump, officers with rangefinders, hunched against the cold, mapping potential U.S. fallback lines. If those spotters relayed accurate grids to their own artillery, the American positions at Elsenborn 2-5 able, request counter battery. A pause. Then, Scout 3, your signal is fading. Can you move to higher ground? Over. Hale looked around. Higher ground meant exposing himself. Staying low meant the Germans might erase the artillery line protecting thousands of Americans. He made his choice. He crawled uphill through knee-deep snow, lungs burning, boots stiff with frozen mud. Every step risked breaking a branch, crunching ice, revealing his position. Halfway up the ridge, he stopped behind a broad tree trunk and transmitted again. Redleg, this is Scout 3, fire mission on grid 25 able. He repeated the coordinates. A minute later, American counter-battery erupted. The Germans scattered. Their observation teams fled as explosions chewed the snow around them. But Hale had transmitted for too long. A German radio listening team triangulated a signal. Within minutes, 3 German squads were converging on his location. 16 December, 1600 hours, crisis builds. Twilight thickened early. The forest dimmed into a gray-blue haze. Hale crouched behind a cluster of boulders as German voices echoed closer. They had dogs. He could hear them barking, straining against leashes. His heart slammed against his ribs. He removed his helmet, scooped snow inside it, and rubbed down his jacket and gloves with the icy powder, masking his scent. Then he slipped through the trees, careful not to leave a clear trail. But the dogs howled, following something. Maybe the faint radio signal, maybe footsteps Hale didn't even know he left. He moved faster, weaving between trunks, ducking behind fallen pines, slipping through gullies. A bullet cracked past his ear, slicing through a branch. They saw him. He sprinted downhill, snow flying behind him. An MG-42 opened up, its metallic roar ripping through the quiet forest. Rrrr! Bark exploded off trees around him. He dove behind a rock, rolled, and continued running until his lungs nearly burst. When he finally collapsed near a frozen stream bed, he pressed himself against the bank, gasping. Above him, German boots crunched across the snow. A squad of 8, then another, then more. They were swarming the forest. Hale checked his map. He was almost 2 miles behind German frontline positions now, deep in enemy territory, cut off from all support. Night approached, temperature dropping below minus 12 degrees C. He was exhausted, freezing, alone. What happened next was pushing beyond anything he had ever imagined.
16 December, 2050 hours. Nightfall. The moon hid behind clouds, leaving the forest in total darkness. Hale found shelter beneath a bent pine, whose branches drooped to the ground like a natural igloo. He shook violently from the cold. His toes were numb, his gloves were stiff. Every breath felt sharp, as if frozen needles pierced his lungs. He forced himself to stay awake. Sleep meant death. He gripped his Garand and listened as German patrols moved through the forest all night. Their lanterns cast dim halos through the trees. Their boots crunched softly. Their officers whispered commands. They were tightening their cordon. Hale curled into himself for warmth. By dawn, he would no longer be hidden.
17 December, 0610 hours, dawn of the second day. A pale, colorless dawn seeped across the Ardennes, though the sun remained hidden behind thick storm clouds. Snow drifted gently, silently, masking movement, swallowing sound. PFC Andrew Hale stirred beneath the drooping branches of his makeshift shelter, fingers numb, face stung by frost. Then he heard it. German voices. Closer than before. Much closer. He pressed himself flat against the frozen ground and parted the branches slightly. What he saw froze him more than the cold ever could. A full German platoon, around 30 men, advanced no more than 40 yards away, sweeping the forest in a disciplined, methodical line. 2 carried MP-40s. 1 had a flamethrower strapped to his back. Others carried stick grenades hooked onto their belts. Behind them marched a second platoon. And behind them, machine gun teams dragging MG-42s on sled platforms. They weren't just patrolling anymore. They were combing the woods, searching every depression, every hollow, every hiding place. For him. Hale realized the truth. He wasn't just a lost scout. To them, he was a threat, a radio observer capable of directing American artillery. His transmissions had already cost them dozens of men. Now, they wanted to erase him.
17 December, 6:40 hours. Hale crawled backwards from his shelter, inch by inch, being careful not to disturb the snow cover. The Germans were moving toward his position in a slow, sweeping arc. He had minutes, maybe less, before they reached him. He checked his gear. Garand, loaded. 4 clips remaining. 3 grenades. Radio battery, nearly dead. Knife, taped to his chest. He tightened the scarf around his neck, pulled his helmet low, and began crawling uphill toward a dense cluster of fir trees that might mask his trail. Halfway there, a German shouted sharply. Hale froze.
had they seen him. He listened. Then, dogs. Barking, snarling. The Germans unleashed tracking dogs into the forest to flush him out. His pulse raced. He staggered to his feet and began running, quietly at first, then in full sprint as a dog's howl split the air behind him. Snow kicked up behind his boots. The cold bit through his uniform. His lungs burned. MG-42 fire erupted. Bullets tore through branches. Chunks of bark showered down. Hale dove behind a fallen tree trunk as bullets chewed the snow around him. The dogs were still coming. He gripped a grenade, pulled the pin silently, and rolled it behind him. A muffled whump shook the snow. A dog yelped. Shouts erupted. The chase intensified.
17 December, 8:30 hours. The crisis deepens. Hale sprinted downhill until he reached a narrow ravine partially sheltered from view. He collapsed against a rocky outcrop, panting hard, then lifted his radio. If he didn't report the German massing east of Elsenborn Ridge, the 99th and 2nd Divisions could be overwhelmed. He clicked the handset. Red Leg, this is Scout 3. Urgent. Enemy regrouping near grid 26 Charlie. Strength, 3 companies. Static. No reply. He banged the radio gently, willing it to work. Red Leg, respond. Nothing. The cold had nearly killed his battery. He stared at the radio, knowing what that meant. Without fire support, the American line might break, and he would be completely alone, with no chance of rescue. He swallowed, steadied himself, and began climbing a small embankment to improve the signal. His hands slipped on icy roots. He pulled himself up, boots scraping, snow spilling down the ridge. He keyed the handset one more time. Red Leg, this is Scout 3. Do the copy? Over? A voice crackled faintly. Scout 3. Weak signal. Send again. Hale transmitted the grid coordinates in short bursts to avoid detection. Then he froze. Voices. German voices. They were above him, silhouettes atop the embankment. He pressed himself against the slope, barely hidden beneath a thin coat of snow. A German soldier stepped to the edge, no more than 10 feet above Hale. Hale held his breath as snowflakes drifted down around him. The German scanned the ravine, MP-40 ready. Another soldier approached. Was in der Nähe sein. He must be close. Hale waited, muscles shaking from cold and strain. After a tense minute, they moved on. He exhaled so quietly, it barely formed steam. 17 December, 11:50 hours. Full crisis. The snow thickened again, blanketing the forest in icy white silence. Hale crept further west, deeper behind enemy lines, hoping to circle around and avoid detection. But fate had other plans. As he approached a small clearing, he heard metal clinking, the distinct sound of belts feeding into a machine gun. He peered through branches. 3 MG-42s were being set up in a triangular formation, each covering a different approach. Behind them, around 60 German infantry gathered, preparing for a renewed push toward the American line. If these machine guns reached the front, the U.S. positions at Hüningen could collapse. He had to stop them. But how? He had only a handful of grenades and a Garand. No help, no backup, just himself. He crawled belly down through the snow to a vantage point overlooking the clearing. His breath formed faint blooms. He tried to hide beneath his scarf. He raised his binoculars. Confirmed. 3 MG-42 teams, 2 mortar crews, dozens of infantry. He keyed his radio once more. Red Leg, white target, fire mission, grid 26 Delta, static. Then, fire mission acknowledged, standby. Seconds passed. Then, American artillery screamed Frad. Explosions tore through the clearing. MG-42 nests vanished in eruptions of fire and snow. Bodies were thrown backward. Mortar tubes flipped into the air. German soldiers scattered in all directions. Hale lowered his head into the snow to avoid detection. But he had stayed too long. A German squad emerged from the eastern tree line, and one soldier pointed directly toward Hale's position. They had seen something. A glint of metal, a movement, a breath cloud. They began advancing. Hale gripped his Garand. This was it. The 3-day struggle had reached its breaking point. 17 December, 12:05 hours. The Germans close in. The German squad advanced steadily, rifles raised, boots crunching rhythmically through the deep snow. PFC Andrew Hale lay hidden behind a fallen log, barely covered by frost and pine needles. His breath formed small clouds he'd prayed would remain unseen. They were close. Too close. 10 yards. 8. 6. The lead German soldier leveled his Kar 98K, scanning the forest floor for movement. Hale's fingers tightened around his Garand. His pulse hammered against his ribs. His vision tunneled. He waited for the exact moment. When the lead soldier stepped past the log, just enough to reveal the next man in line, Hale rolled from cover and fired. Crack. The first German dropped. Crack. The second fell. Shouts erupted. Snow exploded around Hale as the others opened fire. He sprinted through the trees, weaving left and right, branches whipping against his face. He reloaded on the run, jamming a clip into the Grand as bullets tore through the foliage behind him. A grenade landed nearby with a hollow thunk. Hale dove into a snowbank just as it detonated, sending a wave of icy powder washing over him. His ears rang. His legs burned. His lungs gulped cold air that fliced his throat. He stumbled onward, finding cover behind a thick spruce. The Germans weren't relenting. They wanted him dead, and they were now only seconds behind. 17 December. 1300 hours. Fighting for survival. Hale crouched low, shifting silently through the underbrush until he reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a ravine. The drop was steep. 20, maybe 30 feet, but the bottom was covered in drifted snow. He didn't have a choice. He leaped. The fall knocked the wind from him. His legs buckled, and he tumbled into the snow with a muffled grunt. Pain shot up his right ankle. He bit his lip to keep from crying out. Above him, German soldiers peered over the ridge, scanning the ravine. They fired sporadically, bullets slicing the air around him. Hale crawled into a narrow crevice at the base of the ridge, a natural shelter formed by two boulders leaning together. The space was tight, but it shielded him from view. He pressed his back against the cold stone, breathing hard. Then he heard them. German voices. Dozens. They were searching the ravine. He clutched his radio tightly, praying it still functioned after the fall. He clicked the handset. Red Leg. This is Scout 3. Requesting immediate fire mission. Static. Then, send your grid. Scout 3. He whispered the coordinates of the ravine's upper rim, directly where the Germans were searching. Fire for effect. He curled into himself, shielding his head with his arms. Seconds later, the sky thundered. Whistle. Boom. 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 American 105mm shells crashed into the ridge above him. Shrapnel screamed overhead. Snow and earth tumbled down. German shouts turned to panic. Another barrage. Then another. The ground trembled. When the dust settled, the ravine was silent, except for the settling snow. Hale felt tears sting his eyes, not from fear, but from relief. He had survived again, but his radio battery was almost gone. 1 or 2 more transmissions at most. He had to reach friendly lines soon, or he would not last another night.
18 December, 4:20 hours, third night. The temperature plummeted overnight to minus 15 degrees centigrade. Hale's teeth chattered uncontrollably. His fingers were stiff, nearly useless. Frost lined the edges of his scarf. Every breath hurt. He forced himself to move, to crawl, to fight the cold that threatened to shut down his body. By dawn, he had reached the outskirts of a logging trail, one that led west toward American-held ground. But between him and safety lay a final German blocking force of nearly 200 Volksgrenadiers, massing for a renewed assault on the U.S. 2nd and 99th Divisions. If they broke through here, the northern shoulder of the bulge would shatter. Hale's eyes widened as he surveyed the enemy movement. Mortar teams, a full machine gun company, officers with maps, a communication line being strung across trees. This wasn't just a patrol. This was the next phase of the offensive. His last radio transmission had to count. He climbed a small rise overlooking the trail, sheltering himself behind a mound of snow. His fingers trembled violently as he reached for the handset. Red Leg, this is Scout 3. Last transmission. He swallowed hard. Enemy concentration. Grid, 27 Able through 28 Charlie. Heavy infantry, mortar teams, MG nests, preparing assault. Silence. Then, Scout 3, fire mission acknowledged, stand by for maximum fire. Hale sagged with relief. Moments later, the largest American barrage he had ever heard roared across the forest. Dozens of howitzers, multiple batteries, a rolling thunder of destruction.
The German assault force disintegrated under the pounding fire. Ammo crates ignited, machine gun crews were flung backward, mortar tubes shattered. The attack was broken before it began, and with it, the German push toward Elsenborn Ridge collapsed. Hale's final act had changed everything.
18 December, 0910 hours. Discovery. Weak, freezing, and delirious, Hale stumbled westward until he collapsed near a U.S. roadblock manned by troops from the 2nd Infantry Division. A sergeant rushed to him. "My God! Someone get a medic! He's one of ours!" Hale tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. "Fire! Mission! Complete!" He passed out. The medics discovered frostbite in both hands and feet, a sprained ankle, severe dehydration, a cracked rib, shrapnel embedded in his shoulder. It was a miracle he had survived. But his intelligence reports were even more important. They confirmed German troop concentrations that allowed U.S. artillery to stop the northern attack cold. For this, Hale received the Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, a battlefield promotion, a formal commendation from V Corps Artillery. His actions became one of the many untold but pivotal moments that allowed American forces to hold the Elsenborn sector, the only part of the Ardennes line that never broke. 30 to 31 hours. Outro. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWW Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.